Welcome to the Wilkinson Files, an independent review of the findings of Dr. Sarah Wilkinson's report into the circumstances surrounding the closure of the Church of England's Independent Safeguarding Board, closed by its own Archbishop's Council after less than 3 years in operation. Over 6 episodes, each lasting less than 10 minutes, we will examine one aspect of Dr. Wilkinson's findings, one per day, each day, displaying on screen the relevant references to those paragraphs where you can read for yourself what she has said. We will be releasing one episode each day over the next 6 days. We will not be referencing any other documents other than Dr. Wilkinson's report, except where she herself has specifically referred to other information which is already out there in the public domain. Each episode has been prepared by a team with experience in safeguarding, who have examined Dr. Wilkinson's report in great detail to extract key points and to summarise the considerable detail she has provided.
Hello, my name is Martin Sewell. I'm a member of the General Synod, where I have taken a particular interest in safeguarding matters. I was formerly a child protection lawyer and a member of the Law Society Specialist Children Panel from its inception. My professional life spanned the evolution of safeguarding law, from the Maria Colwell tragedy in 1973 through the Cleveland Report in 1987, and I was literally in the room as every mistake was made in safeguarding practice. We learned as we went along. The secular world has learned from those mistakes, but I regret the Church has not and continues to replicate them. In the previous episodes of the Wilkinson Files, we have examined different aspects of the problem which occurred in the creation and closure of the ISB. In this episode, we will look more closely at the way in which the rules, procedures and governance by Archbishop Council are reported in the Wilkinson report as breaking down and so contributing to the ISB's ultimate closure. So this episode is entitled The Governance Gap. The numbers of the paragraphs in Dr. Wilkinson's report which I'm referring to will appear on the screen below. But before we begin our analysis, I would like to make one observation. The members of the ISB were all selected via a vigorous process including external recruiting, and they were recruited for their competence, their drive and their commitment. It's not in the least bit contentious to say that each had a proven track record of success working in that field. Indeed, 2 of them had been honoured by the Crown for their work in safeguarding. Bringing such people with such backgrounds together and integrating them into a functioning team necessitated sound leadership and above all clarity of purpose. As my co-presenter Clive Billenders put it to me, the object of drawing such people into a functioning team was to create fusion, not friction. And anyone who works in the area of safeguarding is normally very committed to understanding and following normal rules and procedures. So, why was there friction between the board members and also between them and the Archbishop's Council and also with the Secretary General, who was de facto the link man between the 2 groups, the line manager? You may recall that one of the earliest major controversies arose when survivors began to suspect that their personal information, which they thought was safely held within the ISB, was leaking across to the National Safeguarding Team within Church House. This resulted in complaints to the Information Commissioner's Office and eventually to the suspension of the chair, which in turn severely reduced the capacity within the team to do its work. It was a small part-time team, and when one of its members went missing, the capacity to deliver the work was reduced. In her report, Dr. Wilkinson clearly highlights the significance of the data breaches upon confidence within the survivor community, with ensuing tension between the ISB members. She attributes this problem to a failure to include data protection procedures in the original ISB contracts, which traces them back to weaknesses in how the whole project was originally conceptualized and implemented. She comments that there were serious design flaws in the creation of the ISB. These fundamental design flaws included a degree of confusion over the legal status, hence confusion over the inclusion of the word independent in the name. So what's in a name? Well, quite a lot actually, since it led to confusion between the ISB members themselves and Archbishop's Council about the extent to which the ISB would have operational independence. So now we come to the heart of today's topic. The ISB's governance arrangements were inadequate from its inception and left it vulnerable to personal conflicts between the ISB members and to contingencies. Dr. Wilkinson says that the ISB members were left in an almost impossible position in trying to address disputes about this. This is the major flaw from the outset. And although Dr. Wilkinson was not allowed to say where the fault lies, well, members of Synod can form their own opinions. So now let's go forward in the report and turn to the role of audit in the story. In any organisation, one of the guardians of probity and governance are the internal and external auditors. They, in turn, are overseen by what is supposed to be an independent audit committee which reports to the General Synod each year. The Archbishop's Council Audit Committee is composed of 6 members. The chair, Mrs. Maureen Cole, who is a member of the Archbishop's Council, and so participated in the decision which led to the closure of the ISB. A second member of the Archbishop's Council, the Reverend Dr. Ian Paul, ditto. 2 completely independent people from outside the Church, appointed for their skills in this area, and finally 2 members of the General Synod who are elected by its members, Clive Billinus, who is presenting some of these reports in this series, and one of the members of the House of Laity for the Diocese of Europe, who is also a certified auditor. There is also Chris Gill, another member of the House of Laity for the Diocese of Lichfield, who is a qualified accountant. As early as 2020, when the ISB was first being created, consideration was given to how it would be audited and therefore the role which the Audit Committee would have in overseeing its activities. Dr. Wilkinson's report does not detail any conclusions which were reached, but it is apparent from subsequent events that since the Archbishop's Council regarded the ISB as one of its own creation, oversight inevitably fell within the remit of the internal and external auditors of the Audit Committee. At its meeting in September 2022, the Archbishop's Council was informed that the Audit Committee wished to commission a review by internal audit of the ISB. This was supported by the 2 members of the ISB who were present. The chair of the Audit Committee had received a letter from one of the committee members expressing concern about the data breaches, and we are told that the Archbishop's Council declined. The reason for that refusal is not stated in the report. 3 members of the Audit Committee who wrote to the chair of the Audit Committee, Mrs. Cole, urging that the issue of the urgent audit of the ISB raised again with the Archbishop's Council, of which of course she is a member, but she refused to do so, saying that this would have to wait its turn until the normal audit cycle. So nothing happened. At the subsequent February 2023 meeting of the General Synod, Mrs. Cole incorrectly informed Synod that the Audit Committee had no authority to conduct an audit of the ISB's operations. Appropriately challenged, she subsequently corrected this error, but then relied on an assessment by the Church's head of internal audit, who is of course an employee of the Archbishop's Council, and this was apparently a low priority issue. Members of the Audit Committee continued to express concerns through March and May, but no action was taken, and Mrs. Cole's annual report to the General Synod in July 2023, as the ISB was being closed, made only a passing reference to the issues raised. Dr. Wilkinson states that the Audit Committee were unsure about the status for the purposes of internal audit until February 2023. But this cannot be true, since she does record that the members of the Audit Committee had been pressing for an internal review for almost 6 months prior to this date, and at no time had any suggestion been made that they were not entitled to exercise an oversight role. Had there been uncertainty, this would have been highlighted as early as September 2022. Was it therefore more wishful thinking on the part of a few members of the Archbishop's Council that this supposedly independent auditing body, chaired by a member of their own council, could not look into what was happening? For reasons which we will go into in more detail in episode 6 of this series, the deliberate ignoring of the Audit Committee members' repeated expressions of concern and requests by the Archbishop Council was a key governance failure, and this contributed directly to the ultimate closure of the ISB. For this episode, however, the next issue which we need to look at is in relation to governance failure in the management of conflicts of interest. Dr. Wilkinson repeatedly refers to concerns expressed that the appointment of Meg Munn as acting chair of the ISB, while she held on, or was going to hold on, to another senior safeguarding role within the Church, created a perception of a conflict of interest. In her report, it is noted that the Secretary-General stated on the 4th of May 2023 that no conflict of interest existed, but that Miss Munn would step back temporarily only from her other posts as chair of the National Safeguarding Panel and as a member of the NSSG. This should be perhaps considered in the context that whilst the chair of the NSP, Miss Munn, at a meeting on the 29th of March, had expressed her opposition to the work of the NSP being merged into the work of the ISB. Perhaps the most powerful example of the report of concerns about conflict of interest comes from Dr. Wilkinson's note concerning the Archbishop's Council meeting in 2023, when an abuse survivor, Jane Cheveux, who was also a member of the National Safeguarding Panel, which Miss Munn chaired, stated that having consulted with the abuse survivors, she felt that Miss Munn had a direct conflict of interest. That was a point of principle and not a matter of personal disrespect. Finally, and this seems at first sight to be a small issue, but it had a huge impact on the ISB, it should be noted that the ISB was deprived of a public contact number for 5 months because of a procedure whereby their contact number was transferred out when a member of staff at Church House, seconded to the ISB, changed jobs and took the telephone number with them. Ms. Wilkinson comments that it was normal practice, but it seems to have been a monumental blunder to have not anticipated that there would be staff turnover, and that if the staff number were to be changed every time this happened, it would inevitably mean that stationery, websites and business cards would potentially all have to be reprinted with each staff moves. This has been described to me as having to change the 999 number every time a police officer moved between police stations. This raises some serious questions about what other telephone numbers might have been cut off in similar circumstances. At the end of her report, Dr. Wilkinson concludes that I find that there was no design by Archbishop's Council to frustrate the ISB's work in this way, but that the governance arrangements for the ISB made by the Archbishop's Council were wholly inadequate, which had the unintended effect of frustrating their work. It also heavily criticises the failure to adequately resource the ISB throughout its existence. The well-known management guru Peter Drucker said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." This means that however often an organisation restructures itself or adopts new strategies, there is a danger that its underlying culture will simply reassert itself. It is hard to read the Wilkinson report and not have a number of serious questions about that governance culture. We will be coming back to this again in episode 6. But tomorrow, in episode 5 of the Wilkinson Files, we shall be hearing the survivors' stories.